Okay, so this is part two, and I was just going into um, my experiences in Colorado. There's a town called Longmont, and it's an old frontier town, and in it is what's rumored to be one of the very first Sears buildings. And we all know Sears started out supplying stuff to the frontiersmen. They had catalogs and they would order stuff from the catalogs, but this was an actual location where they stockpiled stuff from the catalog. And it was on a downtown, it's in downtown Longmont, and there's a whole row of buildings, and they're all historical buildings, and they all have these great big basements. So we're in this building. This building's been converted into a school, and it's a very specialized school for kids that can't go to brick and mortar schools. So they learn at home, and then they come into this location to take tests and stuff. Very specialized school. So I was, I covered almost the whole state of Colorado at one time or another, and Longmont was one that I would visit at least once a week. Now, the people that worked there swear that the basement was haunted. And there were people that worked there that refused to even open the door to the basement. And that's how, they said they saw stuff move down there. They heard voices down there. They heard knocking. If they were working alone, they would hear noises downstairs. And this was very ingrained. And I think there was kind of a group dynamic. Once one person got scared, everyone got scared. And there were times they would say, can we, review the video? We didn't have video of the basement, but we would have video upstairs. And, they would sometimes maybe see something fall on the floor in the video, but nothing that convinced me that anything was really happening. Now, the principal of this location did talk to the owners of the other buildings, and they all had the same story. They were like, yeah, the basements here are haunted. They used to be linked at one time, and a lot of them were like, they would not go in the basement. And he had one story where he talked to a woman a few stores down that she said she was absolutely terrified of the basement. She actually went down there and heard voices and saw something go through a wall and just would refuse to go into the basement anymore. Now, I'm the IT guy, and I know a couple of times I had to run wires, and the easiest way to run a wire is to drop it through the floor, run it through the ceiling of the basement, and poke it back up through the floor. And I've never seen anything weird happen down there. Now, there is you can see on the walls bricked up doors. So at some point these basements were linked together. And in the front, there was a crawl space that went out under the street. And it was probably 4x4, and it was full of old wood and stuff, like people were just throwing stuff in it for storage and it got forgotten. But you can see it went out under the street, and at the end was a brick wall. So I'm assuming this was some kind of crawl space that might have linked to the location across the street. So some of this rings true. Yes, the basements were all connected at one time, but they don't have any, other than that, no one could explain what the ghost was or what happened. Just that the town itself was so old, and the possibility that people died there is almost a certainty. And one of the people at that location, I'm not going to name names, but he was very devoutly religious, and he had this belief, and I've heard this belief before, so it's not unique to me, but his belief was that all ghosts, all things paranormal, UFOs, Bigfoot, anything, telekinesis, Caroline photography, anything paranormal is done by demons. And it's done by demons to distract people from religion. And so anytime you see a video of Bigfoot, that's a demon pretending to be Bigfoot to distract you. Anytime you hear a ghost or voices in the basement, that's a demon trying to distract you. So his whole belief system was based on, if it's not normal, it's a demon. And I've heard that before, and I can see that making sense, because it's not going to be reality and paranormal. It's going to be the good and evil of the religion fighting each other, and it turns it into a black and white issue. It kind of made sense to me, and I kind of see where this guy was going. And I've heard, like I said, I've heard that before, that ghosts are demons pretending to be, if you saw a ghost of your grandfather, that's a demon pretending to be the ghost of your grandfather. And I can see that worldview. So that was his belief, and he was one of the ones that refused to go into the basement. And because he wasn't afraid of ghosts, he was afraid of the demon that lived down there. And so that's kind of a take on it. Um, the UFOs I saw over Bentwaters, I don't think were demons, but like I said, I'm open to any possibility. If anyone can explain what I saw, maybe the nightmares will stop. Uh, but that was, I lived alone in Colorado, so one of the things I kind of got me back into the paranormal. And the thing is, living in the city, it's like, you hear stories all the time of haunted houses and stuff, but you live in a city, you're surrounded by people, you're surrounded by lights, there's always traffic, there's always someone walking down the sidewalk. You never feel alone, and it's hard to be scared of anything. The things I was scared of was getting stabbed by a homeless guy in the alleyway, or stumbling into somebody's hidden pot farm that they're guarding with a rifle. I was scared of real mundane things. And but ghosts and stuff, I've never been afraid of a ghost. But again, until you see part 3, I've never seen one. But there were places in Denver, if you don't know the story of Denver, there's a big park downtown, and the park used to be a cemetery. And back when the city was growing, they wanted to convert this to a park, so they hired an undertaker to move all the bodies from one cemetery to another cemetery outside of town. Well, he started to realize that he was being paid by the coffin, and it didn't matter how big the coffin was. So he was buying these tiny child coffins, and he would dig up a grave, and he would tear the body apart. He'd put part of the body in one coffin, and part of the body in another coffin, and that way he got paid double for moving this one body, because he was moving 2 coffins. Well, the city finally caught wind of this and told him to stop. And then they took all the headstones and they moved those to the other cemetery. So this park literally still has all the bodies that were left, because they only moved a fraction of them. It still has all these bodies under the park. And there's different factions. There was like a Chinese cemetery that they used. And so there's still times, and I remember when I lived there, they were digging for a sewer, and they came across several skeletons. And even though they know there was a cemetery there, they got to stop the dig. They got to verify that these weren't recent bodies. They got to verify, they pull out the old map and see if they could figure out who was buried there. But there are bodies buried under the park. And people in Denver know this. People who don't live in Denver have probably never heard the story before. So this park, I guess there was a movie made about one of the houses on this park. I can't remember the name of it. But the people that live in the houses around this park are always claiming they see ghosts. There's people that visit the park at night who claim they see ghosts. There's all kinds of rumors and myths. If it's a full moon and you lay down on the ground, you can still see the tombstones. And I've tried all these things and I never saw anything. And then I started to visit cemeteries that were supposedly haunted all over Colorado. And man, have I seen some cemeteries. There's a bury your own cemetery, and it's way up in the mountains. And it's literally a place where you can go up, you take the body of your loved one, you dig a hole, and you bury them. And these places, you can tell that they're graves. They have no headstones. Very poor people are buried here. It was, for me, and I visited hundreds of cemeteries, it was one of the most surreal places I've ever been. A lot of the cemeteries were just marked with 2 sticks making a cross, literally, and then jabbed into the ground, just like you'd see in an old cowboy movie, or ringed with stones. Excuse me. But very surreal, and naturally, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's just graves all over this part of the forest. And seeing something like that, you're like, oh, this is the perfect place for a haunted cemetery, but nothing. I took tons of pictures there, took pictures after dark. No ghosts, no poltergeist. And according to YouTube, the new things are no shadow people, no white ladies, no rakes. These, and If you go through the history, if you pull out a book written in 1970 about ghosts, you're not going to find references to shadow people in the rake and these different things that they're calling them now. So it's all cultural. It all evolves, and if it evolves, how can it be real? If a ghost is one thing one year, how can it be something different another year? And to me, that's kind of a telling story that these things aren't real. Another thing, I've watched these, and there's devices you can't really dispute. If someone's got an EMF reader, and they're picking up electricity somewhere, how are you going to tell them that can't be a ghost? You're picking up electricity somewhere. Or they got temperature guns and they're like, oh, there's a cold spot over there. That's where the spirit is. And to me, these things are just ridiculous. But the new ridiculousness is something called a voice box. It goes by different names. And I did see a really good video of a guy where he took one apart and he analyzed it. So what it is it's a box that scans AM and FM frequencies and randomly will select a word that's being broadcast and play it through the speaker. And the theory is, if you're talking to a ghost, it can control this scanning and pick out words and tell you what it wants to tell you. And in reality, it's just a random word generator. But people have glommed onto this as being a way to communicate with ghosts. And this guy that analyzed it actually turned it on and it would just speak to him when he wasn't even trying to contact a ghost. And, it would say stuff like silver bell armadillo. And if you're a ghost hunter, you might start thinking, okay, armadillo, what does that mean? What's a silver bell? You're going to start applying, meanings to these words. And, but it's just randomly picking out frequencies from the radio frequencies. And the thing is, and this was pointed out to me a couple weeks ago, if you're a ghost and you died in 1910 and you're confronted with this modern piece of technology, how are you going to know how to work that? If you want to communicate with a ghost from 1910, you got to have technology from 1910 so that it will understand what to do. If you show it a modern smartphone, how is it going to know what a smartphone is or how to use it? And people are just like, well, it's a ghost. It's going to know how to communicate. And I just don't buy this. If you want to communicate with a ghost from 1910, get an old typewriter, and put a piece of paper in it. Do something that would be logical in 1910. But so many times, especially like when you're watching ones in Europe where they're exploring a castle and the ghosts are supposedly hundreds of years old, they're holding up their voice box going, speak to me through the voice box. And then some random words come out and they're like, oh, that must have meaning. To me, this is like, it's like, how do you look at that and not think it's ridiculous? And I don't want to belittle people who are using these things, but yeah, how do you use these things and not see that it doesn't make any sense? And like I said, I watched a video where a guy just examined it, and that's exactly what it was. The ones that didn't claim to do radio frequencies were just spouting random words. It's just a random word generator is what they are. But supposedly they're communicating with ghosts, and this like really is bizarre to me. And the EMF readers and the electronic voice readers, and then one telling thing about that is they'll always play the clip and they'll say, did you hear it? And then they'll play it again and they'll say, here it is enhanced. So they play the clip and like you literally cannot hear anything. And I've always played the before clip over and over again saying, okay, what am I hearing? What am I hearing? And then they're like, once they point it out, this voice says, I am a pig. And now you can kind of hear in the static, I am a pig. But it's a planted thought. If you played that for people and you never told them what it said, chances are they would never hear it. So you're just inventing things that aren't there. and you might hear a whoosh, and they're like, "Did you hear it? Did you hear it? Did you hear it?" And then finally they'll go, "It says Justin," and then you listen to it again. It's like, "Shush." You're like, well, that's not what it sounded like when you were playing it the first time. And you're like, okay, well, let's enhance this and let's show you like a video readout of the sound wave. And I'm like, you're inventing things. You're putting things in a place that they weren't before. And to me, I'm like, can't they see this? It's like the Emperor's New Clothes. You're like, but he's naked. There's nothing there. But everyone else is like, oh yeah, I can totally hear that now, and yeah, that's a real EVP, and yeah, these words that were randomly generated actually mean something, because this guy owned an armadillo when he was a kid, and you're like, whoa, where are they getting this stuff from? And like I said in the last video, you can't listen to the people who are showing you the videos because they're so ridiculous sometimes. They're like, well, the experts have examined this video and found it to be true, and I'm like, what experts? Because you can go over to a debunking video and they'll show you where the mask was, and they'll show you where you can see two pieces of string, but the middle part's missing. So they masked part of the string, but they didn't get the ends of it. And there's just so many things like that. Just before this object moved, this thing in front of it disappeared. That's where the mask covered something where they didn't put it back when they put the mask on it. So once you see the debunking videos, and once you see thousands of these things, you start to see all the patterns. You start to see all the trickery. You start to see, okay, this person had 800 paranormal experiences. How many are normal for one person in a lifetime? But having said all this, now I don't believe in ghosts. I really don't. I don't believe that UFOs are aliens from outer space. I don't believe that there's a Bigfoot or a Loch Ness monster, and I can't recall all the monsters. There's Yetis and stuff. I don't believe in rakes. If you want to see something really cool, watch the this is funny. I got to break stride again here. I used to love the Skywalker Ranch, or it was the Skinwalker Ranch. Skywalker was Star Wars, but the Skinwalker Ranch is a ranch in Utah that supposedly is home to every paranormal event that's ever happened. And people there was all these paranormal events, and then a company bought the land because they wanted to study it. And they set up cameras everywhere, and they set up motion detectors, and they set up, they completely covered this place. And the stories that you hear from there are just totally weird and bizarre stories. This is where cow mutilations, stories of cow mutilations began. They said the first day on the ranch, a wolf came up and was really friendly. I mean, they even talk about petting it. I don't know who would pet a wild wolf that just walked up to you. They said it was almost as large as a human, and as it walked away, it attacked one of their calves. And they shot it several times, and they said they even saw pieces of flesh fly off of it, and it just walked away into the woods like nothing happened. So that was their very first day there. And they said when they moved in, there was locks on everything. They said they found chains where dogs were chained up outside. So it was really weird. And then the previous owners made them promise never to dig on the land, which sounds really strange, because if you're a rancher, eventually you're going to have to dig a post hole or something. So people would go out and intentionally dig to try to attract something, and they normally would. And there's been UFO sightings. There's been sightings of portals where something opened up and they could see another land through this portal, and something would come through and then the portal would close, and they would see lights in the sky, and they would see cryptids. They would see weird wolves and things walking on the ground. They would find animal mutilations. Everything happened on this ranch. And when they set all the cameras up, and there was this big special, and this is kind of what prompted, and then I was waiting for this 2-hour special to come out, and I was so excited to see it because it was supposedly what they created from all these cameras. But they're like, here's the camera and what the paranormal event happened right off camera on this side, and here's the camera and the paranormal event happened right off this side, and this paranormal event happened right after we shut the cameras off, and this one happened just before we turned the cameras on. And like there was literally no proof. All these cameras, all this talk about this as being the ultimate expose of this land, and everything was nothing, you know. Oh, we just didn't catch that shot. Oh, the camera was pointed in the wrong direction. Oh, this disappeared before we got there. I'm like, that is not proof of anything whatsoever. And I was so disappointed in this video. But the land, after this company owned it, was bought out by some secret person that they won't mention. And he was going to go even more in depth into it. And so when they went to interview this guy, there's armed guards. I mean, people with M16s and Jeeps with mounted machine guns. And you're like, yeah, the military is really interested in this land now. And you're like, but what? And show us proof. And like, okay, here's the camera. If you can see, there's a slight light off to the side of the camera. It was pointed in the wrong direction, but this paranormal event happened off to the side. I'm like, that's still not proof. There's still no proof that anything ever happened on this ranch. And everything from the cow mutilations, you know, I've seen animals in the woods that have been eaten by bugs and other animals. And that's exactly what I saw when they showed pictures of these mutilated cows. They're like, well, something removed the eyes. I'm like, yeah, the eyes are the first thing to go. They're soft, they're fleshy, they're easy to eat. They're not behind bones. You know, the lips, they were like, oh, look at the lips were removed. I'm like, yeah, because that's the easiest thing to eat. You know, if you're a little critter and you come along and you find a dead cow, you're not going to try and chew through the rib cage to get to something. You're going to take the easy parts first. And then if you discover it before bigger predators come, yeah, you're going to say, okay, look at the eyes and lips are gone. Oh, this had to be a UFO. Well, again, makes no sense to me whatsoever. And blood coagulates. I'm like, look at it. We cut this open, no blood comes out. I'm like, have you ever seen a dead deer in the woods? You know, you cut it open, no blood's going to come out. So there was like so much non-event. And this is something I like challenge the people that own this ranch. Let me spend a week there. I would love to do this. I would love to see for myself, because all the people that have been there swear they saw stuff, but they also swear it was always, excuse me, they say it was always just out of range of the camera. And so now the new theory is that this is an intelligence that knows where the cameras are pointed and is just playing tricks with them. And I'm like, wow, you know, what a reach. So this whole special on the Skinwalker Ranch was really disappointing for me. Zero proof. All you hear are stories, and there's zero pictures, zero anything. I think they got one picture of a wolf in the distance. Could have been a dog, could have been anything. But just if you're gonna say you have proof, you need to have proof. And just like when you hear these announcers talking over the YouTube videos, he was the only one there, and he sounds sincere, so that's proof that there was no one else there. So when this thing goes behind him, that couldn't have been anybody else. I'm like, that's not proof. You know, you don't even know who took this video. How are you going to believe that he's just one person and you believe what he says? So, yeah, take the announcers with a grain of salt. But the whole Skinwalker Ranch thing, I was so... Because I grew up reading about the Skinwalker Ranch, and I watched every video on it. I've heard all the stories. And you know, in the documentary, they actually walked through, because you hear stories about these cows that were in a pen, and they turned around and the cows were gone, and they found them in a tool shed, and they said, how are you going to get 3 bulls into a tool shed in less than a minute without them making noise, and the door's locked on the outside? And okay, that's a story, there's no proof of that, but I've heard that story over and over again. But they actually finally walked through, like, here's the tool shed, here's the pen. And what they didn't tell you was the tool shed actually borders on the pen. And there's a big old door on that side. So something might have happened where the cows got into the tool shed. But to say it happened in the blink of an eye, there's just no proof. There's nothing to say, yeah, I believe that happened. Other than you told me a story that it happened. And I don't know, it's just... everything I've seen, and I'm watching bigger and bigger shows on this, because I've seen all the regular, really spooky ones over and over again. I've seen the debunking videos. You know, Captain Disillusion even debunked a few of these videos. It's just, these aren't proof, I think. And especially when you catch someone cheating, that wipes out a whole bunch of videos. It's almost like you can take a board of all the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of videos and start crossing them off when you start finding out how they were faked or what they could have been. Or this guy faked a video, so you can cross off this whole row. It's just, I just find it so hard to believe. So that's going to lead me into part 3. And I'm gonna give you a preview of part 3. When I moved into this house 4 years ago, on Christmas Day, I heard crying in the back room, and I'm gonna give you a tour of it and everything in part 3. But when I heard crying in the back room, this is a duplex, and it's a U-shaped duplex. So that back room is the only place where we share a wall, and it just so happens my daughter lives on the other side of this duplex. So I called her up and I was like, I can hear, your daughter crying. Is there anything wrong? And she's like, we're not home. So I walked back there and it was just kind of a muted crying. And when I walked back there, I couldn't hear it anymore. And I just kind of played it off to, well, maybe there was someone outside crying outside the window. And, because I don't believe in ghosts. I believe there's a logical explanation for everything. But just so happened I was home alone the next Christmas. I know that makes me sound sad, but we celebrate Christmas like the week before and stuff to get all the families together. And again, I heard the crying in the back room. And this kind of clicked in my brain. I thought, well, didn't last Christmas I heard crying in the back room? So I called my daughter up. I said, are you home? Is there crying? And she's like, no, I'm over at Mom's. And I'm like, oh, well, I hear crying in the back room. And she's like, yeah, right. And so the next Christmas, I actually had a roommate that was staying in that room who denies hearing anything. And of course, I was giving her space, so I didn't hear anything that Christmas. So now it's approaching Christmas again, and I'm going to be prepared. I've set up a camera in the basement, and I'll give you a tour of all that. But something happened the other day that really kind of freaked me out. I'm coming home, and I don't use the back door a lot. I turned the key in the lock, and the key twisted back out of my hand. And the first thing I thought was someone standing on the other side of the door, and they heard me turn the key, and they turned the bolt on the other side to relock the door. So I immediately went to anger. I thought, there is an intruder in my house, and I'll be damned if that's ever going to happen. So I turned the key back, and I went to throw the door open, and it slammed back shut. I wasn't prepared for someone pushing on the other side of the door. So I threw the door open again, and it went all the way to the wall, and there was no one there. So I stood there, and I was kind of like, and I'm looking, and I'll give you a tour of how the back door is and how, because I had a friend try to convince me that, yeah, there was someone there, and they ran up the stairs into your house. I'm like, that cannot happen. When you open the door, you see the stairs to the house, and there was no way someone could have pushed that door shut and been up those stairs and into the house before I threw the door open again. And I actually went through the basement. There's no one in the basement. And I went up through the house. There's no one in the house. But that was a really weird event to me. And seeing that happened on the 1st of December, and I call it the Christmas ghost because I heard this crying 2 years in a row on Christmas. So that happening on December 1st, and the fact that Christmas is coming up, I'm like, I watched all these videos, I watched all this stuff happen, so I'm going to do a little paranormal research on my own, and see if I can't capture this Christmas ghost somehow. Maybe catch a shadow person, maybe find a rake. If you don't know what a rake is, you can Google that. You can catch, it's kind of like the Slender Man but pale. I don't know, but I thought it'd be fun to do my own video because that was a really weird event. And when a weird event happens like that, like I said, when I saw those lights in the sky, my brain broke, and I still have nightmares about that. This was like, because I've been watching all these paranormal videos, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? How was this faked? How was this done? And it happened to me, so I'm like, I know what happened to me. And of course, there's no video of it or anything, but I have video set up now, and I'll go through all that in part 3 and give you the tour and everything. And we'll see what happens. It's December I'm not even sure what date it is today. But, oh, it's the 12th. So I got, 12 days of Christmas. It just so happens. And we'll see what happens. And the camera is actually, the main camera is online under part 3. And I never put comments on my videos, but I'll try to put in the instructions for how to view the cam, because it's not just as simple as going to a web page. I didn't buy that fancy of a camera, but you can go to an IP address and view the camera. It is a controllable webcam. I did also, well, I'll give you all the stuff in the next video, but I'm going to wrap it up. And this was part 2. So if you didn't see part 1, that's kind of me giving you background. This was kind of me talking about things because I ran out of time on part 1. And then part 3, I'll give you the breakdown of what I'm going to do to capture the Christmas ghost, and we'll see what happens with that. So 30 minutes is far too long, so just watch for part 3.